Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. So glad you could join us for the next hour as we talk football with you at 201-939-4513. I'm Paul Dottino, he's Matt Citak, and my goodness, what a week for football. We saw 4 more playoff games. I don't know, did you have a chance to talk to John about those yesterday?
No, there was no show yesterday.
That's right, because it was Martin
closed.
Luther King Day, so the place was closed. So this is our first chance, indeed, on this program to chat a little bit about some takeaways off of the playoff games over the weekend, as well as last night's game when Ohio State, Dan Salamone, I know upstairs you're having a party. I get it. Pizza's probably flowing up there as Ohio State knocked off Notre Dame in the NCAA National Championship game last night in Atlanta. If you are not watching the show live, you can always get it as part of the New York Giants podcast network on podcast platforms everywhere or at giants.com/podcasts. We have archives of all of our programs up there, and you can get them on demand anytime you would like. Okay, Matt, first things first.
Yep.
Well, why don't we go backwards?
Okay.
Because last night was the most recent game, the championship game.
Yeah.
Ohio State... The way that their offensive line controlled the line of scrimmage was an absolute textbook in football 101. They just basically said to Notre Dame after the Irish went down on that opening drive that took almost 9 minutes and grabbed a 7-0 lead. Ohio State came back, and I believe they scored on their next 5 possessions. And their offensive line simply said, I know you guys are here tonight, but this field is ours. And they totally controlled the narrative of the game until Notre Dame at the later came back and tried to make a game out of it. And, of course, they wound up falling short. But can't say enough about a Buckeyes team that some people think may have as many as 16 players taken in this year's NFL draft. I'm not talking about first round, folks, okay? I'm not doing that. But Dane Brugler of The Athletic wrote a story just the other day, I think it was yesterday, and may have even repeated it again. Could be 16 NFL draftees, which would be a record.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to bring up, actually, because he tweeted during the game last night, the record for the most picks in a single NFL draft from one school is Georgia, just a couple of years ago, 2022. And he said, right now, my realistic projection for Ohio State is 16 draft picks in the 2025 NFL draft. And, I mean, if you were watching the game last night, frankly, that shouldn't come as much of a surprise because they were dominant on both sides of the ball. I mean, starting with on the offensive side of the ball, Will Howard certainly made himself a lot of money last night with that performance.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. I truly do not know. He was good this season, but, like, nowhere near, the great level that we really saw last night, at least not on a consistent basis. But last night, he was phenomenal. I mean, I think the way he played last night, he's not going past day 2. And who knows, he could be, every year we see a quarterback, 2, 3 quarterbacks rise up draft boards between the end of the college football season and the start of the NFL draft. It would not shock me at all if Will Howard is one of those quarterbacks rising all the way up, maybe even to the end of the first round. Or so early second round, that would not surprise me in the slightest as of right now.
Give me 3 things that he did last night in the game that really impressed you that would make you, want to draft him.
Well, for starters, it impressed me how much confidence the Ohio State coaching staff had in him running the football. I mean, he's not exactly what I would think about as a dual threat mobile quarterback. Mm-hmm. But, and again, he didn't look like Jaden Daniels running with the football down there last night, but he kind of looked like I'm not going to say on the same level because he's nowhere near this level, but like the way he was running the football, like a Josh Allen light. That's what I picked. Like, if they needed someone to pick up 3 yards, if it was 3rd and 2, 4th and 2, they were having Will Howard keep the ball and run it himself. And he was picking up the first down pretty much every single time.
Did you see Ohio State at all this year until last night? Did you watch them prior?
Yes. Dan Salamone forced me to watch a couple of games throughout the season.
Well, that doesn't surprise me, okay? I had not Okay, I had not seen them. Between the college games that I do and then being on road with the team and stuff, I had not seen a full Ohio State game once this year until last night. In short, what you just said, I'm going to sum it up in 2 words: surprising athleticism.
Yep.
And I concur. That is one of my 3 things. I wonder if you have the other 2 as well.
Well, the second thing that impressed me was, I guess, his accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was down the field, whether it was Egbuka on those cross routes all night. Will Howard, I mean, he had 4 incompletions. He was 17 of 21. I think he started the game, at the very least, he was 11 for 11. I'm not sure how far.
Wasn't he 14 out of 15 at one point?
Probably, yeah.
It was crazy.
It really was crazy. He was hitting on just about every single pass. Now, there was, which pass was it? It was like that. I think it was like there was one pass, like a wheel route towards the end zone where he overthrew the receiver. That was like the one true like big miss he had in the entire game. Other than that, you can't really ask for much more accurate passing than 17 for 21. And then the last thing that I guess I'd say would impress me was just his decision making overall. I mean, he really was, finding the right receiver on just about every single play. Even the plays that, that throw I was just that I said he missed on, he still chose the right receiver. Like the receiver was open. Honestly, it should have been a touchdown. He just frankly overthrew that one ball. But if you just look throughout the entire game, I mean, he pretty much did not make any poor decisions really. Like he was careful with the football. He didn't turn it over, throwing it to the right receivers, throwing it at the right time, like when receivers were breaking out of their routes, right when they broke open from the defender, sneaking it into a tight window. Overall, I went into last night's game thinking there's no way I would ever want, the Giants to really draft Will Howard as the potential quarterback to develop for the future.
I think most people thought he might be a mid-day 3 pick.
I was thinking, Will Howard's probably going to go 4th, 5th round. After last night, I'm kind of on board with if the Giants wanted to take a flyer on him on somewhere in day 2, either maybe with the round 3 pick. I don't know where he's going to end up being projected to go, but if you tell me the Giants could grab an elite prospect, an elite position player prospect, such as Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, one of those guys, the very, very top at 3, and then you could still get a guy like Will Howard on day 2 to play behind a veteran quarterback, I would be fully on board on that.
Okay, so my 3 things mirrored yours. Surprising athleticism, unbelievable accuracy. He had no trouble delivering the ball exactly where he wanted to. And the third thing, which kind of encompasses what you said, his poise. He had complete command and control of the offense.
Yep.
There was not any time during that game, in the biggest game of his life, that he looked flustered to me.
Yeah.
Not once. So, anyway, I called this up this morning, and the reason, obviously, we're talking about this is because quarterback is obviously one of the issues that the New York Giants are having going into this offseason. So it is kind of, in a roundabout way, related to the Giants. And we've all talked about if you're going to get a bridge quarterback, well, then you need to get a rookie behind him. So that's why this conversation is relevant, at least I believe. But then last night, after the game was over, I did look at this, and I pulled it up again this morning because I want to make sure I was accurate on this. This year, Howard actually threw for over 4,000 yards, 35 touchdowns against 10 interceptions, and had a completion percentage of 73%.
Not bad.
So I don't pay a ton of attention, I'll be frank with you, because, again, I do college games at the FCS level. Plus, I'm so busy digging into the Giants every single week that I kind of don't pay a ton of attention to what's going on with the power programs until the end. At the very end, yes. But even going into last night, and tell me if I missed something here, I don't ever remember anybody talking about Will Howard's unbelievable stat line, which that is, by the way. Let's call it what it is. That's a hell of a stat line for anybody.
Yep.
I don't remember anybody even suggesting that he would have a chance to go by the end of day 2. I don't remember seeing or hearing a single solitary soul tell me that. Did you?
I only know of one. And again, it's the guy I sit next to upstairs who is the big Ohio State fan, and Dan Salomon. He has been saying for, at least a month or two now that he thinks that Will Howard could end up rising to the point where he's quarterback 3 in this draft. And, after last night, it would not shock me at all if that ends up being the case.
Okay, so if I told you that this quarterback that I have, I'm going to plop in front of you, and I'm going to give you this game tape from last night and not tell you anything else about him. I'm going to give this game tape to you and say, this guy is 6'4", 235 pounds, and he's playing the most important game of his life, and I show you that tape. What choice do you have except to say that guy looks like he's got something?
Yeah.
You don't have a choice.
No.
The only answer you have is that, okay, I think I could work with him.
100%. And I mean, I will say that, last night was a lot better of a performance from Will Howard than, the Texas game last week. Not that he was bad in the Texas game, but last night he just literally just took his game to a whole other level that, we had seen at times from Will Howard throughout the season. Like the Oregon game at the beginning of the college football playoff, he was very good, through 3 touchdowns, over 300 yards. But what you said about the way he just looked so poised out there, he looked like, that nothing was phasing him, that it didn't matter what Notre Dame threw at him. And Notre Dame's defense, they have a good defense. It's not like that was, this was expected to be some high-powered shootout between two offenses and bad defenses. Notre Dame is a good defense that has had a lot of success this year.
Specifically, a high-level secondary. Now, again, their offensive line just dominated Notre Dame's front. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yep.
I mean, Will Howard had plenty of time to do what he wanted to do yesterday. He was, for example, let's go back. BYU against Colorado. BYU just absolutely foaming at the mouth got after Sanders in that Colorado game, and he looked awful, dreadful. Couldn't handle the pressure one bit. Okay? Well, if he had had the kind of protection and the kind of offensive line performance that the Buckeyes gave to Howard last night, Sanders probably would have looked really, really, really good. Probably great. But again, this is all part of the process where you have to look at a guy and say, all right, well, there's his floor, there's his ceiling. Now, what if we start throwing other intangibles into the mix? Like, how will he handle the blitz? How will he handle getting hit? How will he handle having to come from behind? Which, by the way, again, Notre Dame grabbed a 7-0 lead on the first drive. And if you just watched that first drive and accidentally clicked off your television and came back maybe 10 minutes later after your wife's to-do list that you had to deal with, you'd be like, what the heck happened here? Right? Because it looked like Notre Dame started out that game like it was going to be theirs.
Yeah, they came out hot on that first drive. And then the Ohio State defense, which is also filled with guys that are about to be drafted in the NFL in a couple of months. They just snapped into gear and then just realized okay, this is our chance to win a national championship. This is why so many of us came back, because I'm sure you remember, but last year, Ohio State had, I want to say, at least 5 underclassmen that would have for sure been, late day 1, day 2 picks, and they all decided to go back to college.
Right.
And it was to pursue a national championship. Well, it paid off, because those were the guys that were dominating for the Buckeyes last night.
I think it also paid off, if you know what I mean, with the NIL money.
Between
they got
NIL
some cash
money,
too.
now they have a national championship ring, and honestly, just about every single one of those guys boosted their draft stock with how they played all
Without a
season,
doubt.
but especially in the college football playoff. And you brought up the offensive line of Ohio State. What I thought was the most impressive thing was they performed like they did last night, giving Will Howard as much time as he needed without their top offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Their best offensive lineman, Josh Simmons, the tackle, got injured in October and has been out for months. And he is projected in Dane Brugler's mock draft from last week.
He's high.
He's projected to go 10th overall.
Yeah, he's high.
And he hasn't played since October. And now the guy that filled in for him, which is, I want to get his name, Donovan Jackson. Who had been playing guard.
Now he's a tackle.
Shifted outside for, I believe, 8 games or so. didn't give up a single sack in those 8 games once he moved out to left tackle, which is incredible and insane to think about. But so those are just 2 of the guys. I believe they have one other offensive lineman that's probably going to get drafted later in the draft, probably somewhere in day 3. But they just have NFL talent all over the place. I mean, Egbuka at wide receiver is going to probably be a late, go somewhere in the 20s if I had to guess.
And don't sleep on the running backs either.
Both running backs are getting drafted, and quite frankly, I would take either one of them on the Giants. They both looked phenomenal last night in their own respective ways. Judkins and Trayvon Henderson, both of them are probably going to be, I don't know, late day 2, early day 3.
Why don't we just
picks.
make it easy? Tell the NFL to just expand and put Ohio State into the mix. Make them Team 33.
Yeah, I mean, you go to their defense. They have 3 guys from their front 4 that are going to get drafted at the very least by the end of day 2, between Jack Sawyer, the defensive tackle Tylee Williams, and then JT Toilamoa. I definitely mispronounced that, but they just have talent at every single level of their defense. They have NFL talent at just about every position on the offense. So, quite frankly, wasn't too shocking to me that they ended up winning the whole thing. I felt like they had a good chance even towards the beginning of the college football season back in September, but especially once they beat Tennessee in the first round of the college football playoff, it seemed like this team was destined to win it all. And Notre Dame, they honestly made it closer than I thought it was going to be.
Well,
I mean, there was a point where
it
was 31-7, and I'm like, okay, this is the sort of blowout that Dan Salomon said I wouldn't be surprised if it was 63-0. It didn't quite get there, but at one point it looked like we were heading that way. And kudos to Notre Dame for making it a close game at the very end. But at the end of the day, the more talented team came out on top.
Without a doubt. But again, I would say, and you're right, I watched some of the game against Oregon. As a part of it. I did not watch the whole Ohio State game until yesterday, and even a few minutes I missed. But and I saw some of the game against Texas. And, Howard looked fine, but nothing jaw-dropping until last night.
Yeah. Last night he took it to another level.
So, but this now, when I look at his stat line and I say, oh, my God, look at that stat line. Well, when I start digging in, and this is now basically within the next week, I start digging in. I got to go back and watch an awful lot more of him now to figure out, oh, my goodness, where is his realistic neighborhood? It just might be the 3rd round.
Yeah, it would not surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me if he got up to the 2nd round.
Now, remember
I would say
something.
It's January 21st, so a lot can change in the next 3 months.
Yeah.
I would find it a little hard to believe, at least at this point, that he could work his way up to even the end of the 1st round. But again, as I said before, every year we see quarterbacks rise. Some guy that was projected to go late day 2 all of a sudden finds himself in the 1st round conversation. And again, it would not surprise me at all if Will Howard ends up being that quarterback this year.
I mean, they're flicking his highlights now as we have a television screen here while we're doing the program. And we just saw some examples of some of the darts that he threw, as well as his escapability. And that's, again, remember, there's a difference between escapability and mobility. And my goodness, he showed escapability last night on the few times that they got after him.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So anyway.
Good news for the Giants is that Will Howard will be one of the quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl this year, where Mike Kafka will be one head coach, and Giants running backs coach Joel Thomas is going to be the offensive coordinator for the other team. So between those two coaches, one of them is going to have Will Howard on their team, and they are going to get a full week of practices and then the game itself to get an up-close look at Will Howard, along with Jalen Milroe, Dylan Gabriel. I mean, the quarterbacks that are going to the Senior Bowl aren't, the guys that are projected to be top 5 picks, but a lot of those guys that are in the, day 2, early day 3 conversation, those are the guys that are all going to be at the Senior Bowl. So the Giants are going to be well represented there, and they're going to get a great up-close look at some of these guys and see what they got, and again, see if they could be a potential option for the Giants.
I think the most important thing to keep in mind here is that because of the way the college football playoffs had been set up this year with the expansion, you got a really good look at all of these guys in not just one do-or-die game. You got them over a month to see pressure after pressure after pressure. I think there's some significance to that, Matt. It's not just one bowl game at the end of the season that you got to see. No, you got to see basically an NFL playoff type schedule implemented by the NCAA this year. So you couldn't just look at one game and say, well, that was a fluke. He just had a bad day, or he had a really good day. No, what we saw now over this entire 3-game body of work through Ohio State's playoff run, we saw Will Howard can play winning football at the most important time of his career. That's important. That's very, very important. And so I'm very interested to see some more work on him. I will tell you this. It's also easy to forget, and this was also one of Bill Parcells' things many, many years ago about experience. He's a 5-year guy. Remember, Kansas State for 3 years, 2 years, Ohio State.
Yep.
He's a 5-year guy. Okay, just keep that in mind. It was one of the things that we always credited Bo Nix for when he was coming out. He was a 6-year guy, had started more games at quarterback at the NCAA Division I level than anyone who had ever played. How much did that help him with the Broncos?
Yeah, helped a lot. You know, I don't want to compare Will Howard to this quarterback.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying he's Bo Nix.
No,
but the experience factor is a key.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you 100%. And what I was saying is I don't want to compare Will Howard to this quarterback that I'm about to bring up, but just what you mentioned about, you know, the fact that Will Howard just showed up in these big games, looked so poised, like it didn't faze him at all. I mean, they were playing in the Atlanta Falcons Stadium yesterday. It was filled to the brim, and he looked completely poised out back there. Like nothing was fazing him. So the comparison I'm going to make, and again, they're completely different quarterbacks, so they're not similar in that regard, but it just kind of reminded me of Jaden Daniels last year. I mean, he had 3 years at Arizona State, transferred to LSU, had 2 seasons at LSU, so again, 5-year starter. And that last year at LSU, they didn't make a national championship run, but they were a very good team that played in some very, very big SEC games. And I think that helped Jaden Daniels make the immediate step to the NFL and like not get too caught up in the moment in some of these big games that we've seen him, lead the Commanders to as a rookie. I can see just from that regard, the poise and not getting, fazed by a big game, that regard, I see similarities with Will Howard. Like he just showed by the first time with this 12-team playoff, he led Ohio State to 4 big victories against 4 of the best teams in the nation and looked good just about every single week doing it.
Mike Tannenbaum, the former GM of the Jets, or president of the Jets, he had said something to us during the combine shows last year when we were talking about a bunch of these quarterbacks who were going to be in last year's draft, and some of the guys who had been through not only an extra year or 2 of experience, but also had transferred to multiple schools, 2 or 3 schools. And Mike brought up a really, really, really interesting point, and I kind of subscribed to it. I thought it made a lot of sense, and I think we're seeing that maybe it actually is more of a benefit than a detriment. Because here's what he pointed out. He said, for guys who stayed in longer and transferred and bounced to a couple of programs, well, it gave them more of a palette to work off of. They may have gotten to work for 2 or 3 offensive coordinators. Now, for some guys, that may jumble their minds and scramble their minds and screw them up to where they can't function. And they never got to develop the way maybe they were supposed to. But it seems as though if it's the right guy, he can actually benefit from that. It can be a plus because by the time that he gets to the NFL, he's already been through that ringer of having to adjust, of having to change, of having to see all these different things, which in years past, if you were a college quarterback and you were at one school for 3 years, you knew one system.
Yeah.
That's all you knew. And by the way, if you played in a conference that didn't do a lot of blitzing or that didn't do a lot of passing or whatever the case may be, you were basically pigeonholed into that's my comfort zone. That's all I know. Now you come to the NFL where everything is a wide scope. There's nothing out of bounds in the NFL. Now, let's face it, in the NFL, the playbooks are a heck of a lot thicker, and there's a lot more they're going to throw at you. Well, if you were able to navigate successfully the ability to go through that type of situation by having multiple coordinators, multiple teams, going through the transfer portal, and then continue to succeed, that probably tells you something about that guy up here. So that when he gets to the NFL, it's not going to scramble him. He's going to be able to say, hey, look, I've already done a lot of good things going through all of that stuff. They tried to scramble my brain as much as they could, and I handled it. I came out good on the other side. I'm still on my feet. The NFL is going to look at that and say, okay, so you've been exposed to 2 or 3 different offensive systems, and you've seen the kind of scope that you've seen. That maybe gives him a head start.
Yeah.
I just wonder if maybe Mike Tannenbaum wasn't right when he said that last year. I kind of thought that he was. I was leaning that way. I'm starting to think that there's maybe even more to that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's twofold. You kind of touched on both these, but you're getting experience in just more than one offensive system. You know, you could end up playing, for someone that switches schools, could end up playing in 2 or 3 different offensive systems.
Easily.
And to be honest, none of them could end up being anything similar to what that guy will end up running in the NFL. But you still have experience just running various different
Exposure
systems.
Exposure to it.
First of all. And second of all, which is the more important point in my opinion, and you said this, is that it shows that you're capable of kind of flushing out, you know, one offensive system that you learned and were playing with for the last year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it may be, and you're able to quickly learn this completely new playbook with new verbiage, because in the NFL, coaches change all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, coaches, offensive coordinators, offensive systems, those rotate. You know, you're lucky if you can continue having continuity with an offense, the same exact system with the same coaches for more than a couple of years. That's just the way the NFL is these days. So the fact that Will Howard, you know, Jaden Daniels last year, whatever quarterback switched schools, Bo Nix, these guys showed that they are capable of quickly picking up a completely new system, a new playbook, and still playing at a high level almost immediately after. Because in the NFL, as a quarterback, that is something you're going to have to do at some point in your career. Very rarely do you see one quarterback in the NFL just stick with the same head coach and offensive coordinator his entire career. Because if you have success, your offensive coordinator eventually is going to leave to take his own head coach
He gets a job.
And then there are changes in the offense and stuff. So the fact that, you know, Will Howard is just this example, but any of these quarterbacks that switch schools, the fact that they are able to get and have so much success playing in a new system so quickly, I personally agree with you, and Mike Tannenbaum, that is going to help them at the next level 100%.
It's another variable that I think we have to look at. Now, if the guy came through the other side and was beaten up and bloodied and it showed that he couldn't handle it, that's another story too.
Of course.
But it certainly can be something now that has to be looked at, I believe, when you think about the intangibles for these guys. Remember, the combine is all about the measurables. There are intangibles too that go into that file when they start putting up the value on the draft board. This, I think, needs to be one of the intangibles. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, part of that, just real quickly, which we saw on Hard Knocks last year, is those, you know, during the interviews at the Combine where they brought the quarterbacks in and, you know, Brian Dable. Show me a play. And then, like, remember it. Then, you know, start asking him other questions and then go back to that play and be like, hey, read that back to me. So the ability to pick up, you know, new systems or systems you're not exactly familiar with or comfortable with, being able to pick that up is definitely something that NFL teams look for when they're interviewing these players in the pre-draft process. So your ability to, you know, be able to pick up that new system or be able to recognize something just from looking at a play on the board, that's going to help you in NFL teams' eyes.
All right, guys, 201-939-4513. Time for your phone calls. We didn't even get to the NFL playoffs, but if you want to talk about that, we will do that as well. But I just thought this was a real interesting topic to kind of delve into because it just lent itself to the conversation, giving the Giants needs, quite frankly, not just a quarterback, but even Ohio State's offensive linemen. You may want to start thinking about those guys, too.
Or defensive line.
Yeah, defensive line, too. All right, we go to line one. And Marvin in Delaware. Coach Marvin, you are on the program. Good morning.
Good morning, Paul. Matt, how y'all doing?
Good. How are you, Coach?
I'm doing okay. Kind of like disappointed because I only get the call once a week because I had that I wanted to make people aware of Will Howard for this next game, and he performed pretty well. As I was wanting to see how he does. I think he really didn't come on until the playoffs came. He had 3 good games. I think he ended up with somewhere like 1,100 yards in those last 3 games or something like that.
Coach, they're the most important games of his career, and he excelled, and there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, and I think that's why yesterday was a good game for him. People were looking to see how he performs in that game. When I saw him in the Michigan game, that was a game kind of turned me off from him a little bit. And I saw the Tennessee game, I saw in the Texas game. So I said, let me see what he looks like in this championship game. And he did pretty well. I think he could be a day 3, a 3rd-round pick or somewhere around there. But he did make himself some money. When it comes to that position, guys get pushed up 1 round earlier than they need to go. So he could run into that 2nd round where somebody's looking for him. But we'll see. It's important to see how he does in I think it's the Senior Bowl he's playing in.
Yes. Senior Bowl.
So that'll be interesting to see how he performs in those practices and in the game itself. So,
no doubt.
I keep an eye on him. The other point, what I wanted to make a point of is I was thinking about the draft because of this weekend. This weekend was a rough weekend. And I can imagine Mr. Morrow how he felt this weekend. This is a draft we can't miss on it. We're going to have to come up with some hits. And I'm not talking, he's a pretty good player. We got some good players. I mean, a a game changer in this draft this year. Looking at our division, at what teams are doing, the Barkley thing is killing. Is just a killer. I got crushed all weekend. I'm not a trolling type person, but I was getting trolled this weekend.
Join the club, Coach. Join the club.
Oh man, I got one from Yasin Carmichael, and you should recognize the last name. That's Harold Carmichael of the Eagles' nephew.
Okay.
He sent me something and asked me one of the craziest questions: do I think that Joe Shane should get a Super Bowl ring if the Eagles win it? And I'm like,
oh my goodness,
hang up on him.
There you go.
I ain't got time for
this. That's it.
And then I got one more. The last one was a friend of mine, Mongo. Me and him was together up in Boston. He lives here in Philly with his girlfriend, Javon. And he calls me, and Javon's on the phone, and it's not him. And she's in Eagle gear. They going to the game, and she's thanking me and thanking the Giants for Barkley. I'm just like, you guys are killing me. So it was a rough weekend to watch. And that's why I feel that we have to get a hit this year on the draft. I mean, a game changer. We're in position to do it. I watched Jaden Daniels this weekend, played an outstanding game, and I started thinking about. I went back and took a look at Shador. And Shador, he holds the ball too long because he's trying to make plays. It drives me crazy the way he does it. But I think if you really look at his accuracy, his timing, ball placement, and he can stand in he has good presence in the pocket. He's aware pretty much what's going on around him. But I think if a team can protect him, not just the Giants, but if he goes to a team that can protect him, and probably the same thing with Will Howard, if you can get a team to protect them, these guys can make plays. Howard had a clean pocket last night. He did get some guys in his face a few times, but he pretty much had a clean pocket.
Correct.
And he was making plays while he was doing it. And I know most quarterbacks can do it, but the accuracy, the timing, the anticipation, all of them don't have that. And these guys actually had it. And I thought Shador has that very well. And so if we get Shador, if he falls to that, I think we should take him if he's there. I'm fine with Ward, but I'm leaning towards Travis Hunter really. So we're in position. I wouldn't trade any of my access for moving up. I wouldn't move up. I would just sit and whatever comes my way. I'll take the best player that comes my way. So,
well, let's put it this way, Coach. Before you go, Tennessee and Cleveland are going to be 1-2 unless one of those teams trades out, and I don't think anybody is advocating the Giants trade picks and move up. So there's a real chance that 2 quarterbacks go before the Giants pick at 3. That is not just a good chance, it's probably an excellent chance. So with those 2 quarterbacks off the board, if they don't take one of those impact defensive players, beginning with Travis Hunter, or as I've said, Graham, Carter, Johnson, all 4 of those guys, you could make a case for any one of those at number 3. But I think for me, I agree with you. The Giants need to get a guy who's going to be an all-pro caliber player in that spot. You have to get not just a good player, but the Giants, the one thing you can say about Joe Shane's draft so far, because he's drafted a lot of productive players and a lot of good players, I've said it before and I'll say it again. To this point, they haven't had an all-star in the 3 years of their drafts. Now, that doesn't mean that Newbin can't be. It doesn't mean that Neighbors can't be. It doesn't mean that. But to this point, they have not drafted a guy who turned into an immediate all-star. So if you think that a Graham or a Hunter or a Carter or a Will Johnson can do that, you got to make that pick. You just have to. And it happens to be an impact guy on defense. Come on. You're going to tell me the Giants don't need an impact guy on defense? I'm going to tell you they do.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been saying for the last couple of weeks at least, that if I'm sitting at 3, kind of regardless of what happens at 1 and 2, I'm leaning more towards one of those top defensive players, because I do think that between Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, because those are my top 2 non-quarterbacks in this draft, I think both of them have the potential to be all pros in the NFL. And I don't think it's going to take them that long to even reach that level. And I've seen over the last couple of days a lot of, I guess, growing buzz, because we're still 3 months out from the draft. So at this point, it's all rumors and speculation, but growing buzz that Cleveland could decide to skip on a quarterback. If they go out and sign free agency, if the Falcons end up releasing Kirk Cousins, this is a popular speculative rumor, but if the Falcons release Kirk Cousins, which seems like there's a decent chance that happens, Cleveland is going to go after him hard to reunite Cousins with Stefanski, because they were together for Kirk Cousins' first few years in Minnesota. And if they do that, then they might look more to the Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter of the draft and not attack the quarterback position in round 1, which if that happens, then one of those 2 quarterbacks is dropping to the Giants at 3.
Unless Cleveland trades the pick.
Unless Cleveland trades the pick. I mean, I saw one mock draft this morning that had the Giants moving up from 3 to 2 to take Cam Ward. And it cost, I think, the 2nd and 4th round pick to move up 1 slot to get Cam Ward.
I think I've seen the same thing, and I'm hearing the same thing about Cleveland getting a free agent quarterback. But we don't know. Everybody's guessing at that.
Yep.
So the Giants are in a position just to sit. I'm with both of you. Paul, Ben, you always are eye to eye. And I see the same thing. That you take that. You need that impact defensive player. And because I don't believe there's no impact offensive players in this draft. We got some good guys coming out, but it ain't unless somebody's going to surprise us, which we always get one. He could be a 2nd, 3rd round player that surprised us all, but I don't see any of them in the top of the draft. The defensive guys, we full of them in this draft, and we need one of those guys to be a hit. That's why I like Travis. You move Banks to the 2, CB2, Travis CB1, and I think Banks benefits from that, and it'll help the defense. If you go Carter, inline linebacker, he doesn't have to play the edge. Only play the edge if you need him to play the edge. And you have Mason in there also, who can be an impact in defensive tackle. So we got a lot of choices that we can deal with. I don't want to trade back, though. I just don't want to get out of that. I don't want to get past that 5 spot. I just don't want to go that far
6 is the spot for me, Coach. You know that. I appreciate the call.
Yeah, I know.
All right, be good. Thank you, Coach Marvin.
Guys,
we always love hearing from him. 201-939-4513.
I actually, Cover 3, the weekly column, John, Dan, Salomon, and I write for Giants.com. Today, we put it out, and it was, our early look at the early landscape for this year's draft, and I handled the narrative of a potential trade down. And I'm actually very much a proponent to trading down this year. But I agree with you that I would not want to go, and I wrote this in the article, past my absolute line drawn in the sand was number 7 with the Jets. Ideally, 6 to the Raiders would be the ideal trade down spot because, as you mentioned, then you still get, one of Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, Will Johnson, who would, I guess, one of those 4,
right,
plus the 2 quarterbacks is 6. I said 7 because personally I really like Tet McMillan, the Arizona wide receiver.
Understood.
And a trade down to pick up additional assets, I would be perfectly happy taking McMillan at 7. But more importantly, securing a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL draft, in which, again, we're over a year out, so who knows who actually ends up declaring for next year's draft.
This is good. I like that you like my plan.
But
I'm happy. I'm happy to hear that.
As of right now, the outlook for the 2026 quarterback class is a lot stronger than this year's class. This year happens to be a rather weak class. Of course, when the Giants have the 3rd overall pick, it's a weak quarterback class. But
well, you got Manning and Nussmeier right off the bat.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. Those 2 top guys right off the bat.
The Tennessee quarterback as well.
Sure.
There are a couple of others. But just, again, we don't know if all those guys are going to declare. Arch Manning is only going to be a junior next year, so he could decide to go back to school. We don't know. But the early outlook certainly seems like next year's quarterback class will be a lot stronger. If you could trade down and still get one of those top 7 guys in this year's draft, plus, whatever, maybe a 2nd or 3rd round pick in this year's draft, but more importantly, the 1st round pick in next year's draft, which then next year you could potentially use to trade up to get one of those quarterbacks that you might feel a lot stronger about. So I don't think you should force a trade down, obviously, because Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, I think, are kind of on their own tier.
I'm only doing it if I get a first rounder as part of the deal next year. Otherwise, I'm not doing the deal.
Yeah, you have to have a first round pick included.
Write this down. Because Matt and John, this is the first time in BBKL history where all the hosts agree with what I tried to tell them. I'm glad you guys learned. Because there's always somebody. In the past, it was Lance or Fiegels. Somebody would have to disagree, or Howard. But right now, I got everybody on board.
Yeah, I mean,
this is great.
I don't think you should obviously, force a trade down.
No, absolutely not.
If someone offers you a strong
I need
package,
a 1 and a 2.
Yeah, if someone offers me their 2nd round pick this year and their 1st round pick next year, let's say the Raiders or even the Jets at 7, one of those teams offer me that,
you'll split the picks. See, I won't do that. I want them both next year. I want to load up on draft capital for next year.
I would like to get some extra draft capital this year. Whether maybe it's a 5th round pick, something. You got to give me a little something in this year's
All
draft.
right, we can worry about those little tweaks
But regardless,
later.
You can't force it. But if someone is willing to offer you a 1st round pick in next year's draft plus more, and you still can stay in the top 7,
absolutely,
I think that's something you have to strongly consider.
It is by far the most logical scenario because it allows you to hedge. It allows you to hedge on 26.
The only way I would go against this is if the front office is very, very confident and has conviction about Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. If they feel one of those 2 guys is the guy to bring the Giants out of, the NFC East basement that we've been in for years.
See, that's a different
question,
question,
to take us to that next level and be a contender, then without a doubt, you stick at the pick and you take that guy. I would even be okay moving up a pick or 2 if you have the full conviction on a guy. It's just
that's always the case. If you have full conviction on a guy and you don't take him, you're not doing your job. You have to take the guy that you're all in on. But it's a different question. I never answer the question about what I think the Giants will do because I'm not upstairs. It's none of my business what they're going to do.
Of course.
I tell you what I would do if I was in that spot. And you're entitled to do it that way as well. And you've said it. So you don't have to back it up.
I'm just saying
that's
that
what you would do. And I think that's awesome. Everybody's on board with me.
Yeah, I'm saying that now because, again, we're 3 months out. But more importantly, we don't get to sit in those meetings, obviously, with the prospects. That is just for the front office and coaching staff. And that is a very telling part of the whole pre-draft process.
No doubt. For the record, the Giants pick 34th overall, which is the 2nd pick of the 2nd round. the first pick in the third round, which is 65, and in the fourth round, they are picking third, which is 103. At least that's the way it looks right now. So you're talking about 4 picks in the top 103 choices in this draft.
And there is a possibility it could be 5.
Don't know yet.
We don't know that yet, but the guy from Over the Cap put his projections out for the comp picks today, and he
possible third rounder.
And he had the Giants like on the borderline between a third or a fourth round,
Right.
either the last third round comp pick or the first fourth round comp pick, which obviously is a difference of 35 or so picks, which is kind of big. But he left the door open that there is at least a chance that the Giants could get a end of third round comp pick.
Yep.
And then you add in the fact that Brandon Brown is interviewing for a GM job. Mike Kafka is interviewing for a head coaching job. If either one of them were to secure that job because of those new rules,
correct,
the Giants would get an additional third round comp pick. So
for 2 years.
For this year and next year, yes. Talk about extra draft capital to potentially use in next year to move up. Yep. That would certainly go a long way, although it would be a little bit tough to see those guys leave.
It would be
because
they're
big
good
parts of the team.
No question.
If they get a chance at a promotion, you obviously wish them well, congratulate them, and take the picks.
Before we go back to the calls, remember the Giants Huddle podcast has all kinds of Giants and NFL folks on it, all kinds of information there and deep-seated interviews with John. You can subscribe to your favorite Giants podcast by going to your favorite podcast platform or giants.com/podcasts. So we certainly appreciate that as well. We go back to the phones.
Very quickly, just because of a little bit of breaking news. The PFWA released their all-rookie team just now.
Oh, the Giants are there.
Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy both made the all-NFL rookie team. Just those
and
two.
And Nubin did not?
Nubin and Phillips did not. For the cornerback position, it went to Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, and they only do the first team. There's no second team.
That means they don't pick a slot. That's the problem.
Well, they just picked 2 cornerbacks overall. Cooper DeJean is a slot, but it was just those 2. And
but if you pick a slot, now you have to pick 3.
Yeah, as great as Drew Phillips was, Cooper DeJean was a little bit better this year. And then in safety, it was Kalen Bullock of the Texans and Evan Williams of the Packers, which Nubin, my guess, would have been probably 3 on this list, but they don't do that. So congratulations to Malik and Tyrone.
Very cool.
Deserved.
Absolutely. 201-939-4513 is our phone number. We go to Randy in California. You're next on the show. Hello, Randy.
Hi, guys. It's been a while. How you guys doing?
Yes, we're doing okay.
Good.
How are you?
How are you?
Please stay safe. I don't know how close you are to the fires.
No, I'm in the Northern California, so I don't even smell it up here. But yeah, it's bad down south.
Yeah. Prayers to all those folks out there for sure.
Yeah, amen for that. Hey, I love your guys' show, but I want to ask you a quick question, just a hypothetical scenario. Couple quick ones, and I'll kind of let you guys go at it. If there's a rookie quarterback in the draft that's injury prone the last 3 years, he's a good quarterback, but he can't stay on the field, would you draft him?
Depends where. See, for any guy who's had injuries, there are 2 things that have to be done. Number one, you got to vet him with your medical staff. Your medical staff is going to give him a grade, okay? They're going to give him a grade between 1 and 5 based on what they believe his injuries are the impact of those injuries are going to have on his NFL career. Okay? So once they give him
stay on the field, right?
No, it doesn't matter. No, you're not. They're going to give him an injury grade. That injury grade is going to be based on his propensity to get hurt, the types of injuries he had. Are those kinds of injuries nagging? Are they the kind of injuries that, okay, you know what? You fix it, you repair it, and he had a good repair, and they don't think it's going to happen again. There's literally a slew of questions. You're making it out to be much too simple. It's not that simple. The medical people are going to vet him with a fine-tooth comb, and they're going to come out with a grade. It's going to be from 1 to 5, okay? That grade is now going to go into his personnel profile. And now that grade gets interpreted into the meatloaf that is his overall grade. This is a very, very peel back all the layers of the onion process, it's not as simple as you want to make it. I wish it was, but it's not.
But I will just say this. All you got to do is go back to last year's draft and look at Michael Penix, who had 4 straight years in college of season-ending injuries, then put together 2 healthy seasons to finish his collegiate career, and then ended up being the 8th overall pick. And a lot of teams had first-round grades on him some point in the first round. So it does somewhat vary. I think it also depends, as Paul was saying, if these injuries are things that, like, your training staff thinks, oh, this could pop back up somewhere down the road, that's different than an injury that was sort of just, a one-off freak injury.
Look, I'm going to make it real simple for you, and obviously we're talking about player X. If the guy got knocked out with concussions 3 or 4 times during his college career, I'm going to tell you right now that's not going to go well on the grading system for the injuries, okay? Because that's serious stuff. And the medical staff is not going to be real confident about giving him a good grade. Okay, let's just make it simple.
Okay, then how could we sit here and say that when we're sitting here looking at you guys keep wanting to talk? Everybody wants to keep talking about Garoppolo.
Well, it's totally different.
He's done for weeks. Every time he gets on a field, every season that he even gets on a field, he gets knocked out. And with our offensive line, he may last 2 weeks.
Okay, here's what you got to remember about Jimmy. His biggest injuries, and I believe he's had a concussion as well, his biggest injuries were a broken hand and a torn ACL. Those were the 2 injuries that got him the most. Now, what we know from experience in the NFL is that quarterbacks come back from torn ACLs. We've seen that time and time again. So that's probably not going to downgrade him very much. And the broken hand, they will examine it. They'll look at it, and they'll determine if his hand is still functional to do everything you need to do as an NFL quarterback. And if it is, they'll check off on it. It's really that simple. Yeah. And the other thing you have to remember is that when a guy gets hurt multiple times in college, now he's entering the NFL with already a long checklist of injuries. That's a problem. Right. If you come in with a lot of collegiate injuries before you even play your first pro game, that is a much bigger negative than a guy who gets hurt once he's in the NFL. Big difference.
Okay. Now my number 2 question. I'm definitely on board with you when the old school days of thunder and lightning, right? We got Tracy, he's our lightning, right? But I would love to have a pounder just north and south pound the ball. Right? Let's go back to that because, that took a lot of pressure off Eli when he first came in. We had that kind of running game like with Jacobs, right? We had Bradshaw. We had Thunder and Lightning, right? Mm-hmm. And that always seems to take a lot of pressure off, but we use these small running backs, right, to try to pound in the middle when we should be looking at that brawler like Jacobs, right? And that will take a lot more pressure off the rookie quarterback, no matter who we put back there.
So, do you want to draft a big? Do you want a big, physical, nasty halfback who's just got more size and power, or do you want to draft a pure fullback? Yeah. Do you want a fullback?
No, I want a Brandon Jacobs type of.
There are not that many of those.
Rodney Hampton.
Well, Rodney Hampton was not that originally. Thanks for the phone call. Right. Rodney originally was more of a slasher with speed and a second gear. And then as he got older, because he had bad knees, he knew he couldn't survive in the game with the quicks anymore because his knees weren't going to, his one knee in particular wasn't going to hold up. So he wound up gaining power, and he became much more of a plotter and a power back, just like what Otis Anderson did later in his career. Otis converted himself from a guy who had a lot of moves, although he was always big, to becoming more of a power back and a plotter. Rodney did the same thing. He converted himself. His career, he was 2 different running backs. So, I mean, I don't know. I haven't actually asked you if you would like to get a fullback on this team, or you would just be happier getting another running back in the room that's a power guy. I've never asked you that.
Well, some of our callers might remember this, but in training camp last year, I was a big fan of Jakob Johnson. I love having a fullback on the team. Mm-hmm. So I'm very much for that. But to what the caller was just saying, I'm fully on board with potentially drafting another running back to kind of pair with Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone, I think, showed that he's capable of handling a full workload if asked to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, there were several times where handled the full workload and had a ton of success.
Got to hold on to the ball better.
Yes, the fumbling definitely is something that he needs to work on, but I would love to pair him with another running back. Again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, one of the Ohio State running backs I think would be great. But the one thing I just want to say is Tyrone Tracy is not a little guy.
He's
just not. He's 5'11", 210. That is what he's listed on as on Giants.com. That is not small by any means. And I understand what the caller was saying with wanting the next Brandon Jacobs, but if you look around the NFL, there's only one running back that is even remotely in the same ballpark of size to Brandon Jacobs, and that is Derrick Henry, who is in a league of his own in terms of NFL running backs currently, maybe even all time. He could end up, it wouldn't shock me if he ends up in history as the greatest running back or one of the greatest running backs. There's not really many other running backs that are that big in the NFL these days. You look at some of the top running backs in the league, these are big, strong guys, but they are not, 6'4". Bijan Robinson is 5'11". I mean, and he's one of the best running backs in the league. That's just kind of, I think, the size frame of where we see the top running backs in the NFL these days. So I just wanted to point that out. I agree, would love to pair another young, talented running back with Tyrone Tracy. I just don't think you necessarily need to go out looking for some 6'3", 6'4", behemoth of a running back. Jahmyr Gibbs is 5'9", and he was one of the best running backs in the NFL this year. I could go on and on. So, yeah, again, Junkins from Ohio State, you put him next to Tyrone Tracy. That is a scary running back duo that I would not mind seeing. That's just one example, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm just looking up here some of the sizes. If you want a couple of names of some big backs, Omarion Hampton from North Carolina, 6 feet, 220. And Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, 6 feet, 225.
Yes.
Okay?
So no one's even bigger than 6 feet.
That's it.
These top running backs.
Those are your two biggest backs who are projected maybe to go in the top couple of rounds.
Yeah, so realistically, no one is mirroring Brandon Jacobs' size at the running back position anymore.
Guys, I don't run from anything that I say. I was a huge fan of Estime out of Notre Dame last year. Big fan. Power back. Thought he would be a great fit for the Giants. But, they went for more of the elusive halfback instead of the power back. So maybe this year, maybe they go get a power back. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't.
Devin Singletary is still under contract.
He still is. And they consider him their power back.
Yeah.
So, if a lot depends on the scheme and what they want to run, and then they also have to determine, can the guys on the roster do what they want to do within their scheme? It's that simple. And to this point, they believe that Singletary is the guy who can handle what it is that their scheme requires. And you know what? I think they're kind of right in that regard, because this offense really does not emphasize having a power back. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
So for that reason, they're probably doing it the more logical way. Again, I think it's important that when we discuss these kinds of things, there are opinions or philosophies that we might have, but those are individual. We're not necessarily projecting them onto the team. No. The team knows what it is that they need and what they want and what they've got to get and what they have.
They know a lot better than we do.
That's for sure. All right, we go back to the phones. 201-939-4513. Heads up, folks. Wilson and Roxbury's next on the show. Hello.
Holy.
What's going on?
How are you? Wow.
Hey,
wow.
Wilson.
You guys led me to the last spot. Okay. But
well,
okay,
that's where you came in on the order. Pearson didn't cheat you now.
I know.
That's where you came in.
Listen, I don't have a lot of time for what I was going to say, but listen, two things. There's no, I said this to you before, but I didn't tell Matt this. There's no way in hell that the Giants are drafting a quarterback, third overall pick, with a resume that they have 1 foot at the door. They can scream, all these callers can call up. There's no way, I'll bet my house on it, and I will lose it, that they are not letting do that. You're not drafting a quarterback for another general manager because you don't know if this guy's coming back. That's number one. Number two, I digested what John Mara said for about a month, and you can tell people something without actually telling people something. You know what John Mara said to everybody? He said that they better make the playoff. If not, they better be within one game of the 7th seed, the last game of the season. Not that you win 5 games and you out of it in December and you win 2 meaningless games at the end of the season against backups and you win 7 games. That's not going to cut it. When you said 6 games last week, Paulie, I almost had a heart attack. Okay? So that's not happening. You know what I mean, Paulie? So I don't know what they're going to do. But it's not.
Wilson,
what?
Look.
Paulie,
John Mara's statement. John Mara, hold on. No. When John and I discussed this, we were talking about, hypothetically speaking,
I know
could
did,
you
Paulie.
imagine a scenario where they would win 6 or 7 games, whereby the scenario would allow John Mara to feel better about the team? There is a potential scenario, I suppose, but I don't know. That might be okay.
That scenario doesn't exist.
Here's what I will tell you, Wilson. I'm not going to pull John into this room and ask him in front of you guys. I'm not going to do that, okay? Because he's not going to give you a number. But I think what John and I were trying to tell you is that it's very difficult, next to impossible, to imagine that John is going to be anywhere near pleased enough if they win 3 or 4 games. And probably 5's not going to do it either. And that's just being logical. But it's strictly hypothetics because John Mara is not going to put a number on it.
Paulie, of course, Paulie and Matt. I'm sorry, Matt. How are you, Matt?
I'm good. How are you doing, Wilson?
I'm sorry, Matt.
Paulie,
I really am. You got to deal with this.
Everything, Paulie, everything's hypothetical.
No doubt.
So that's what I'm telling you. Let me tell you something, Paulie. That's why, remember when I said I told you so? Paulie, well, you know, without you realizing, you and Johnny, without you realizing it, you opened the door for what I told you so is I told you so. Because I said to you a long time ago, I said you don't just say the static quote. You don't just keep everything the same for the sake of keep everything the same. Because without you realizing, you know what this whole season's going to be about? How many wins they need? What happens if they start 2-6? If they start 2-6, do they last the whole season? That's why. It's a moot point now, but that's why it would have been better off for all Giant fans. Mostly Giant fans would have a fresh start, so we don't have to have this conversation. That unfortunately, Paulie, without you realizing it, you open the door for what everybody thinks. You know what I'm saying? It's great because. Wilson,
I'm not into opening or closing anybody's doors.
No, I know.
I'm simply trying to make sure that everybody understands the possibilities, because every scenario could lead to a different possibility. So when people call up, like yourself, and say one particular item, and you focus on that one item, well, we simply have to say, well, wait a minute. That's probably one of 8 different things that could happen. That's all.
But of course, Paulie, that exactly. But Paulie, listen, we live in reality now. Okay?
Yeah.
How can you draft a quarterback with a 3rd overall pick when you don't know?
Wilson,
you're coming back fully.
Wait a minute. Whoa. Why are you asking me about drafting a quarterback at number 3? I've already told you I would not do it. Matt's already told you he would not do it. John's told you he probably would not do it. So why are you throwing that at us for an argument? I don't understand.
No, I'm not throwing that at you. What I'm telling you is that it is such an impossible situation for Giants.
Which is why you need to sign the right bridge. This is exactly why I'm coming at you with Jimmy Garoppolo, because he's been to a Super Bowl before. You need to sign a bridge who can win.
Paulie, and I know you're running out of time. Let me ask you something.
Final thing, because we got to run.
I love you. You know I love you.
All right, go ahead.
You're not tell me that Jimmy Garoppolo.
We're not on different pages here. We're actually on the same page. So go ahead. One more. Go ahead.
You tell me something. Tell me the truth, because I know you tell me the truth. You telling me that Jimmy Garoppolo is better than Daniel Jones?
Right now, given the circumstances that the Giants are in, Daniel Jones is not even in the equation. He's not
I
an option.
understand that, Paulie, but
So you
this
have
is
to get
where
the
I'm
best
coming
option you
from. This
can.
is why everything is so wacky.
Okay, but here's the problem, Wilson. You got to deal with reality. Reality is you're not getting Daniel Jones back. So listen to me. Hold on. I'm going to give you one more homework assignment, and then you're going to have to go and do the homework.
I gave you my homework assignment. And you
complete. No, you're going to get another one now. This is another homework assignment for you.
What homework you want me to give you?
Go make your checklist of what your best bridge quarterback has to have. Go make that checklist. Go make that checklist. And Pearson, we got to cut him off. Wilson, I'm giving you your homework. Okay, you wouldn't listen, so now we had to mute you. Go do your homework. Get me a checklist. I want your checklist the next time you call me on this show. I want your checklist of all the things that your bridge quarterback, your perfect bridge quarterback in the Giants scenario has to have. Then you're going to tell me which one of the bridge quarterbacks available checks the most of those boxes. Go through that exercise. I've done that exercise. I took a long time to do it. And I dug, and I did my homework. And Jimmy Garoppolo came up the winner. Okay? It's that simple.
Yeah, so I'm just going to touch on two things very quickly. One, because a previous caller also mentioned this, I just want to say, I know you love Jimmy Garoppolo, but I just want to make clear, would not be my first choice of bridge quarterback.
That's okay.
Which, yeah, we're allowed to differ in opinion, but
who checks your boxes the most?
Right now, and I want to do a little more research before giving like a final stamp of my decision, but I am very intrigued by Justin Fields, and he's a very, obviously, different type of bridge quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo, but just wanted to point that very quickly out. And then second thing, which the Wilson's call kind of got derailed there, but just to what he was originally saying, I understand where both of you are coming from. I understand what Wilson's saying, where if you tell me right now the Giants win 6 games next year, no one's going to say, oh, that's great. The Giants are heading in the right direction. Like, that's good. At the same time, 6 wins isn't the same in every single situation.
Correct.
The Giants could win 6 games next year and then lose another 5 games by less, 1 possession, because the Giants do have a very tough schedule. And I see where you're coming from, where that situation, 6 wins, but 5 very close losses against good teams, that could have people, whether it's, higher ups or just fans, being like, you know what, we are heading in the right direction.
Or what if half the starting lineup was injured again?
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that, there are different, a 6-11 record on paper is not good.
Correct.
Obviously. But
no question.
There are different circumstances around that record.
Different levels of 6-win teams.
Just look at the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers went 5-12 this year, which obviously 5-12 is not a good record. However, people in Carolina, they are feeling pretty good with how that season went, especially because the second half, Bryce Young, they were in most of those games in the second half of the season. People in Carolina have feel good and have optimism moving forward.
Let's not put a number on it. The point is, no matter what the number is, there are different levels to every number. That's the point.
Yes.
So let's get off the number, Wilson, okay? Please, let's just get off the number. The point is, there are different levels to every number. That's it. That'll do it. Thanks for listening, folks. I know we probably gave you a headache, and now you need to go run to the medicine cabinet. Do apologize. On behalf of Wilson, I also apologize. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live. It's part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcasts. For Matt Citak, I'm Paul Dottino. We will see you next time.